I am Audrey Mitchell, 27 years old, and I invented a medical device that changed diabetes care forever. My parents sold my patent behind my back, telling me, "We sold your silly patent for $10,000. They called it a favor, claimed I would never succeed alone. What they sold is now valued at $1 billion. The company erased my name completely. Now my parents show up at my new company headquarters in designer clothes begging for family shares. Before I dive into this story, let me know where you are watching from in the comments. Please hit like and subscribe if you have ever had someone underestimate your potential. Trust me, what happened next will show you why we should never let others define our worth. I grew up in Boston with my father, Richard, a moderately successful real estate agent who constantly reminded everyone of his business acumen, and my mother, Margaret, who worked as an elementary school administrator but mostly deferred to my father on all important matters. Our household operated under strict rules where my father controlled most decisions, especially financial ones. He presented himself as a self-made entrepreneur, though his actual success was modest compared to his boastful claims. From an early age, I showed aptitude for science and engineering. My science fair projects regularly won top awards, but my father always stood a little too close during the awards ceremonies, quick to explain to judges and other parents how he had guided my process or helped refine my ideas. By high school, this pattern was firmly established. I would create, and my parents, particularly my father, would hover nearby to absorb partial credit. When college application time arrived, I dreamed of attending MIT for biomedical engineering. My father insisted on more practical business schools closer to home. After countless arguments, I secretly applied to MIT anyway and was thrilled to receive not only acceptance, but a partial scholarship. The night I showed them the acceptance letter remains vivid in my memory. Biomedical engineering. That is hardly a secure career path, my father scoffed, scanning the scholarship details. And this only covers 60% of tuition. Where do you think the rest will come from? My pocket, as usual. Despite his discouragement, I was determined. I took out student loans for the remaining tuition and worked part-time throughout college to cover living expenses. My schedule was grueling, full course load during the day, working at the campus library until midnight, then studying until 3 in the morning. My parents visited campus once, and my father spent most of the time pointing out how impractical my degree would be compared to business or law. My inspiration came during my junior year while volunteering at Massachusetts General Hospital. I was assisting in the emergency department when paramedics rushed in a teenage boy in diabetic crisis. His continuous glucose monitor had malfunctioned, failing to alert him to dangerously dropping blood sugar levels. As the medical team worked to stabilize him, I stood against the wall watching intently. Third case like this month, an exhausted nurse told me later. The current monitoring systems have too many failure points. Battery issues, connectivity problems, calibration errors. One small malfunction and patients can end up here or worse. That night in my tiny apartment surrounded by textbooks and empty coffee cups, I began sketching ideas. What if there was a way to create a more reliable system? Something with redundancies built in, longer battery life, and a fundamentally different approach to glucose sensing. I knew enough about biomedical sensors from my coursework to understand the limitations of current technology, but not quite enough to solve the problem completely. For the next 8 months, I devoted every spare moment to research and development. My apartment transformed into a makeshift lab. Kitchen counter covered with circuit boards and sensor components. Bathroom shelves stacked with medical journals and technical manuals instead of toiletries. My roommate eventually moved out, unable to tolerate the chaos, which only gave me more space to work. I missed family holidays, canceled dates, and gradually isolated myself in pursuit of solving this problem. My parents called my focus obsessive and unhealthy, suggesting repeatedly that I was wasting my time on a project that real professionals with proper funding were already working on. The breakthrough came during winter break of my senior year. After experimenting with different sensor arrangements and power management systems, I developed a prototype that utilized a novel approach. A dual sensing mechanism with an advanced algorithm that could predict dangerous trends before they placed for sense, became critical, all powered by a miniature battery with 3 times the standard lifespan. The redundancy meant that if one sensor began failing, the system would not only continue functioning, but would alert the user to the partial malfunction. Early testing looked promising. My academic advisor, Dr. Jenkins, introduced me to several medical device professionals who reviewed my work. Their enthusiasm was immediate and genuine. "This could genuinely change the standard of care," said one medical device engineer after examining my prototype. "The approach is elegant, simple in execution, but sophisticated in design." When I shared this feedback with my parents during a weekend visit home, my father nodded absently while scrolling through his phone. "That is nice, honey. A good little project for your portfolio when you apply for real jobs." He glanced up briefly. "You know, my friend Mark has a nephew who works at Johnson & Johnson. Maybe he could help you get an entry-level position in their marketing department." Despite their lukewarm response, I proceeded with the patent application process during my final semester. The process was complex and expensive, draining my meager savings. I had to file detailed technical specifications, multiple drawings, and precise claims about what made my invention unique. Every night after classes and work, I would refine the application documents until my eyes burned from exhaustion. When the preliminary patent approval came through, I allowed myself to dream bigger. I imagined my device helping millions of diabetes patients around the world. I pictured small children being able to play without their parents constantly worrying about glucose levels, athletes competing without limitations, elderly patients maintaining independence longer. The possibilities seemed boundless. Several smaller medical device companies expressed interest after seeing my presentation at the University Innovation Showcase. 2 investors even approached me about potential seed funding. For the first time, I felt validated as an inventor and engineer, not just a student with a cute hobby, as my father often described my work. I graduated with honors that made my prototype and patent application representing the culmination of countless hours of dedication. As uncertain as the future was, I felt ready to take the next step toward bringing my invention to market. Little did I know that the greatest obstacle would not be technical challenges or market competition, but betrayal from those I trusted most. The first hint that something was wrong came on a Sunday evening when I returned to my parents' house, where I was temporarily staying while looking for affordable housing near the biomedical corridor in Cambridge. I had been out meeting with a former classmate who worked at a medical startup to discuss potential collaboration opportunities. As I quietly entered through the side door, I heard my father's voice coming from his home office. "Yes, I understand it is a preliminary patent, but the technology is sound. My daughter developed it at MIT." There was a pause. "The asking price is $15,000, but we could settle for $12,000. I froze in the hallway, my heart suddenly pounding. Was my father trying to sell my patent? The patent I had spent my entire senior year developing and my last dollars filing. I stepped closer to the partially open door. "Richard, maybe we should discuss this with Audrey first," my mother's voice said softly. "Discuss what that company is offering real money now, not some vague promises about future potential. $10,000 is nothing to them, but would be very useful to us right now. The kitchen renovation alone will cost twice that." "But it is her work, her patent," my mother protested weakly. "Her patent that we co-signed," for my father replied firmly. "Remember who paid for her braces, her school trips, her first laptop. Besides, she needs to focus on getting a stable job with benefits, not chasing inventor fantasies." I backed away from the door, mind racing. It was true that my parents had co-signed some documents related to the patent application. At the time, I had been so overwhelmed with the complex legal paperwork and running low on funds that I had gratefully accepted their help. My father had presented it as just a formality since I was still using their address for mail while finishing school. I had trusted them completely, never imagining they would use it against me. 3 days later, my father called a family meeting at dinner. My mother prepared my favorite meal, which should have been my first warning sign. As we sat down at the dining table, my father cleared his throat with an air of self-satisfaction that I had seen many times before, usually preceding announcements he considered brilliant. "Audrey, we have some excellent news," he began, cutting into his steak. "We sold your silly patent for $10,000 to Meditech Corporation. The check should arrive next week." I stared at him, fork suspended midair, certain I had misheard. "You what?" "We sold your patent. Meditech is a substantial player in the medical device industry. This is a great outcome for a student project." He took a bite, chewing thoughtfully. Most college projects never earn a penny. You sold my patent without even telling me. Without my permission, my voice rose with each word. That patent is mine. It is my work, my invention. My father waved his hand dismissively. Technically, we had joint ownership since we co-signed the paperwork. And let us be realistic, Audrey. What were you going to do with it? You have no business experience, no industry connections. Meditech can actually develop it properly. I had investors interested. I had meetings scheduled next week with 2 different medical device startups. I pushed my plate away, appetite completely gone. Do you have any idea what that patent might be worth if properly developed? Now you are being dramatic. My father sighed. These big companies throw out promises to young inventors all the time. Nothing ever comes of it. $10,000 is a guaranteed return. Be grateful. Grateful, I repeated incredulously. You sold my future without my consent, and you want me to be grateful. My mother reached over to pat my hand. Honey, your father knows what is best. He has much more business experience than you do. This is not about business experience. This is about my intellectual property, my work, years of research and development, my future career. I stood up so abruptly that water spilled from my glass. You had no right. I had every legal right, my father countered coldly. The paperwork you signed gave us joint ownership. You should have read it more carefully before signing. That night, I could not sleep. I lay awake replaying every interaction, every document I had signed, trying to understand how this had happened. At 3 a.m, I got up and dug through my files, finding the patent paperwork. There it was in legal language I had barely understood at the time, a clause granting my co-signers partial rights to the intellectual property. The next morning, I called Meditech directly explaining that there had been a misunderstanding and that I had not authorized the sale. The representative was sympathetic but firm. I understand your frustration, Miss Mitchell, but we have a legally binding agreement with the patent holders. Your signature is on the co-ownership documents, and your co-owners executed a legal sale. Our legal department has reviewed everything thoroughly. But I am the actual inventor. The patent is based on my research, my design. My voice cracked with desperation. I suggest you consult with an attorney if you have concerns about the co-ownership arrangement, he replied diplomatically. From our perspective, the transaction is complete and valid. When I confronted my father again, his response was even more dismissive than before. Stop being so dramatic, Audrey. You are not business savvy enough to handle something like this. We did you a favor. That little project would have sat gathering dust while you chased unrealistic dreams. Now you have some cash to get started on a proper career. It was not your decision to make, I insisted, tears of frustration burning my eyes. It absolutely was my decision. I am your father and I know what is best for you. Always have. He did not even look up from his newspaper. You will thank me someday when you have a stable job with health insurance instead of being another failed entrepreneur living in your parents' basement. Over the next week, I cycled through shock, disbelief, rage, and crushing disappointment. My mother attempted to mediate, but her efforts consisted mainly of suggesting I try to understand your father's perspective and focus on the positive. He only wants what is best for you, dear, she said, repeatedly, as if that justified the betrayal. If he wanted what was best for me, he would have discussed this with me first, I responded. He would have respected my work and my choices. Your father has always been the decision-maker in this family, she replied, as if that explained everything. 10 days after the family meeting, the check arrived made out to both my parents. Not a penny was offered to me, the actual inventor. That evening, I packed my belongings into my used Honda Civic. My entire life condensed into a car trunk and backseat, clothes, books, laptop, and the remnants of my prototype that had not been detailed in the patent paperwork. As I closed the trunk, my father came outside, arms crossed. Where do you think you are going? He demanded. Away from here. Away from you. I did not look at him as I opened the driver's door. Do not be ridiculous. Where will you stay? How will you support yourself? I will figure it out. Without your help. I finally met his gaze. I would rather struggle on my own than live with people who have so little respect for me and my work. So dramatic, he scoffed. Just like your grandmother. Always making mountains out of molehills. I drove away that night with no concrete plan, just a desperate need to escape the suffocating betrayal. My college friend Jasmine offered her couch until I could find a place of my own. As I drove through the darkness toward Cambridge, tears streamed down my face, but I felt something else too, a sense of grim determination forming beneath the pain. This would not be the end of my story. Somehow, I would find a way forward. The first few weeks after leaving my parents' home passed in a blur of practical challenges and emotional turmoil. Jasmine's generosity extended to 2 weeks on her couch before her boyfriend moved in, necessitating my quick exit. With minimal savings and no immediate job prospects, I found a studio apartment in Somerville that could charitably be described as compact. In reality, it was little more than a converted storage room with a kitchenette, a bathroom where the shower practically touched the toilet, and just enough remaining space for a twin mattress on the floor and a small desk I rescued from a curb. The walls were thin enough that I could hear my neighbors' conversations, arguments, and television choices in excruciating detail. The window overlooked a brick wall 3 feet away, admitting only a slim rectangle of indirect light during certain hours of the day. But it was mine, paid for with the last of my graduation money, and more importantly, it was away from my parents. Job hunting became my full-time occupation, though my heart was not in it. I applied for engineering positions at medical device companies, research assistant roles at laboratories, even administrative jobs at tech firms. My interviews were exercises in pretending my passion for innovation had not been crushed. I smiled through questions about my career goals, while internally questioning if I even had any left. "Tell us about a time you overcame a significant challenge," one interviewer asked. I almost laughed. How could I possibly explain that my greatest challenge was ongoing, that my own parents had sold my intellectual property from under me, and that I had not yet overcome it? Instead, I gave a sanitized answer about a difficult school project, watching their interest visibly wane as I spoke. 6 weeks after the patent sale, I saw the first industry mention of my device. A small paragraph in a medical technology newsletter described Meditech's promising new continuous glucose monitoring system currently in development. There was no mention of the original inventor. Reading those words, I felt physically ill, as if someone had reached into my chest and squeezed my lungs. I consulted with 3 different patent attorneys, scraping together consultation fees from my dwindling funds. All delivered variations of the same discouraging assessment. Unfortunately, the co-ownership agreement you sign does give your parents legal standing to sell their interest in the patent, explained the third lawyer, a gray-haired woman with kind eyes but a firm delivery. Without evidence of fraud or coercion, your options are extremely limited. Litigation would be expensive and frankly unlikely to succeed. As my financial situation deteriorated, I took a series of temporary jobs data entry at an insurance company, night shift stocking at a grocery store, tutoring high school students in math and science. Each paycheck went immediately to rent, utilities, and student loan payments, leaving barely enough for ramen noodles and discount produce. My social circle contracted rapidly. Friends from college were launching careers, attending networking events, dating, living the dynamic post-graduation lives I had once envisioned for myself. I declined invitations, unable to afford even modest outings, and unwilling to explain my circumstances. "You have been so distant lately, my friend," Taylor texted. "Everything okay?" "Just busy with work," I replied, not mentioning that work meant scanning groceries at midnight while customers complained about prices. 8 months after the patent sale, I attended the annual Medical Device Innovation Convention, not as a presenter or even as a regular attendee, but as a temporary server hired to pass appetizers during the opening reception. Dressed in the catering company's uniform black pants and white shirt, I moved through crowds of industry professionals offering trays of miniature crab cakes and champagne flutes. At the Meditech display booth, I froze. There, rotating on a sleek stand, was a prototype remarkably similar to my design. The housing was different, more polished, but the core technology, the dual sensor arrangement, the extended battery configuration, all unmistakably evolved from my work. Our GlucoGuard system represents a quantum leap in continuous glucose monitoring, the Meditech representative explained to a cluster of interested attendees. The proprietary dual sensing technology provides unparalleled reliability. My hand trembled so violently that the champagne glasses clinked together, drawing annoyed glances. I retreated to the kitchen area, claimed sudden illness, and left my shift early, forfeiting much-needed pay. That night, I experienced my first full-blown panic attack. Alone in my tiny apartment, I could not breathe, could not think. The walls seemed to close in as I gasped for air, convinced I was dying. When the physical symptoms finally subsided, leaving me exhausted on the bathroom floor, the emotional pain remained sharper than ever. My deteriorating mental state affected my job performance. I was fired from the grocery store after repeatedly missing items during inventory. The tutoring agency reduced my hours after a parent complained about my distracted demeanor. Even my temporary administrative positions became harder to secure as my interview skills suffered from my increasing depression and anxiety. Nearly a year after the patent sale, I ran into Professor Jenkins, my former advisor at a coffee shop near MIT. I had been avoiding campus and academic connections, but this encounter was unavoidable. He barely recognized me at first. My appearance had changed so dramatically. Weight loss had hollowed my cheeks, and persistent insomnia had darkened the skin beneath my eyes. Audrey. My goodness, I almost did not recognize you. How have you been? His initial smile faded quickly as he took in my appearance. I am fine, I lied automatically, just busy. He studied me with the observant gaze that had made him a respected researcher. You do not look fine. What happened? Last I heard, you had some promising interest in your glucose monitoring system. The genuine concern in his voice cracked something inside me. Before I could stop myself, the whole story came pouring out: my parents' betrayal, the patent sale, my current circumstances. Professor Jenkins listened without interruption, his expression growing increasingly troubled. That is unconscionable, he said finally. Absolutely unconscionable. Have you considered legal action? 3 lawyers told me the same thing: the co-ownership agreement is legally binding. I have no case. I stared into my cooling coffee. Besides, I could never afford the legal fees. What about your current work? Are you developing anything new? I shook my head. I can barely keep a roof over my head. I have no lab access, no resources, and honestly, what would be the point just to have it taken away again? He reached across the table to grasp my hand briefly. Do not give up, Audrey. Your mind is too valuable to waste. This is a setback, yes, but not the end. His kindness only made me feel worse. After we parted, I wandered aimlessly through Cambridge, eventually finding myself near the engineering building where I had spent so many hopeful hours developing my prototype. I did not go inside. That weekend, I hit what felt like rock bottom. An industry journal published a feature article about Meditech's revolutionary glucose monitoring breakthrough, describing in glowing terms the very technology I had created. The article praised the company's innovation and vision, predicting substantial improvements in diabetes care worldwide. A quote from Meditech's chief innovation officer described how the device would fundamentally change the landscape of diabetes management. In a frenzy of grief and rage, I gathered all my remaining research notes, prototype sketches, and development journals and destroyed them. Pages were torn, components smashed, years of work reduced to garbage. When the destruction was complete, I sat amid the debris, feeling nothing but hollowness. The next day, I called my mother for the first time in months. I had been ignoring their calls, returning holiday cards unopened, erecting every possible barrier between myself and their betrayal. But in my lowest moment, some childish part of me still longed for maternal comfort. Audrey, is that you? We have been so worried. Her voice was both relieved and cautious. Did you see the article about Meditech's new glucose monitor? I asked without preamble. A pause. Yes, your father mentioned something about it. Are you calling to apologize for your behavior? Because your father feels that... Apologize, I interrupted, incredulous. You stole my work, my future, and you think I should apologize. We did what was best for you, as we always have, she replied, her voice hardening slightly. And look, the device is being developed properly now. By professionals. By professionals using MY design, MY innovation, I said, my voice rising. Do you have any idea what you took from me? What we took. Now she sounded genuinely offended. After all, we have given you your education, your opportunities. I hung up, realizing that even now they could not or would not understand the magnitude of their betrayal. That call marked the true nadir of my journey. The moment when I finally accepted that no recognition, no validation, no apology would be forthcoming from either my parents or Meditech. If I was to survive this, I would have to find the strength entirely within myself. 2 years passed. I had managed to secure a stable but unfulfilling position as a sales representative for a medical equipment company. The job involved visiting hospitals and clinics to demonstrate basic monitoring equipment, a cruel irony given my background. My apartment had improved slightly, a one-bedroom in a less dilapidated building, though still far from comfortable. I had established a routine that, while not satisfying, was at least sustainable. The acute pain of betrayal had dulled to a chronic ache that I carried with me daily, but had learned to function around. Then came the morning that shattered this fragile equilibrium. My sales team was gathered in the break room before heading out for the day's appointments when a breaking business news alert appeared on the television mounted on the wall. Meditech Corporation stock has surged over 300% following FDA approval of their groundbreaking GlucoGuard continuous glucose monitoring system, the anchor announced. Industry analysts are calling this the most significant advancement in diabetes care in decades. The screen showed footage of my device being demonstrated at a major medical conference. The sleek, polished product barely resembled my crude prototype, but the core technology, the innovation that made it revolutionary, was unmistakably mine. Initial orders have exceeded all projections, the reporter continued. With an estimated market of over 30 million diabetes patients in the United States alone, Meditech's valuation has skyrocketed, approaching $600 million since the announcement. My colleagues continued their morning chatter, completely unaware of my connection to the headline news. I excused myself and locked myself in a bathroom stall trying to process this new information. $600 million. Based on my innovation. The innovation my parents had sold for $10,000. Over the following months, Meditech's success became impossible to escape. The GlucoGuard system was featured in medical journals, business publications, and mainstream media. Diabetes advocacy groups praised its reliability and ease of use. Healthcare providers reported significant improvements in patient outcomes. The stock price continued to climb as international approvals followed the FDA's lead. 9 months after the FDA approval, Meditech announced its initial public offering. The company was now valued at just over $1 billion with the GlucoGuard system as its flagship product and primary driver of valuation. I watched the financial news coverage in my apartment, a bottle of cheap wine, my only companion. The next morning, hungover and emotionally exhausted, I called in sick to work. While scrolling mindlessly through news coverage of the IPO, I saw something that made my blood run cold, a video interview with Meditech's CEO conducted in front of the company's headquarters. And there, clearly visible among the group of company representatives standing behind him, were my parents. I increased the volume, feeling dizzy with disbelief. We are also pleased to recognize the Mitchell family, who were instrumental in bringing this technology to Meditech, the CEO said, gesturing toward my parents, who beamed with pride. Their commitment to medical innovation has helped make this day possible. The camera zoomed in briefly on my father, now dressed in an expensive suit that I had never seen before. We have always believed in supporting medical innovation in our family, he said smoothly. We are just pleased that this technology can now help millions of patients worldwide. No mention of me. No acknowledgement that their contribution consisted of selling their daughter's patent without her consent. They had not only profited from my work, but were now publicly taking credit for it. I spent the next 3 days in a state of near catatonia, unable to eat, barely sleeping. When I finally returned to work, I moved through my duties like a ghost, my mind continuously circling back to the footage of my parents standing proudly behind the Meditech CEO. The company's meteoric rise continued. 6 months after the IPO, a feature article in a major business magazine described Meditech as the healthcare success story of the decade. The GlucoGuard system had exceeded all sales projections, with international expansion accelerating and a pipeline of complementary products in development. The stock price had increased another 40%. Meditech's market capitalization now exceeded $1 billion. That evening, alone in my apartment, the full weight of what had been stolen from me finally became unbearable. It was not just the money, though. The financial contrast was stark enough. My parents had sold my invention for $10,000, and it was now the cornerstone of a $1 billion company. It was the recognition, the opportunity to see my work help others, the career I should have had, the future that had been snatched away. I called my supervisor and requested a week of sick leave, claiming a severe flu. In reality, I barely left my bed for days. I did not shower, barely ate, and slept in erratic bursts, punctuated by periods of staring blankly at the ceiling. The few friends I had maintained called and texted, but I could not bring myself to respond. On the 5th day of this darkness, I hit rock bottom. Staring at my reflection in the bathroom mirror, I barely recognized myself. My hair was limp, and unwashed dark circles underscored my eyes, and my expression was utterly vacant. For a terrifying moment, I wondered if this emptiness was all that remained of me, if the passionate, innovative person I had once been had been permanently extinguished. Who even am I now? I whispered to my reflection. What is the point of anything I do? In that moment of utter desolation, something unexpected happened. A spark of anger different from the helpless rage I had felt before ignited somewhere deep inside me. This was not the destructive fury that had led me to destroy my notes years earlier, but something colder and more focused. If the world, my parents, and Meditech had all conspired to erase Audrey Mitchell, the inventor, then perhaps it was time for Audrey Mitchell to reinvent herself. My return to the world of the living began with a chance encounter. I had forced myself to leave my apartment after a week of isolation, mainly because my refrigerator contained nothing but condiments and a suspiciously old carton of milk. At the corner coffee shop, still looking disheveled and exhausted, I accidentally bumped into an elderly woman while reaching for sugar packets. "I am so sorry," I apologized, helping her steady her coffee cup. "No harm done," she replied, studying me with keen blue eyes behind stylish glasses. "Though you look like you could use that coffee more than I do." Something about her direct gaze and no-nonsense tone caught my attention. She introduced herself as Dr. Eleanor Warren, retired professor of biomedical engineering and former medical device entrepreneur. When she asked what I did, I gave my standard evasive answer about medical equipment sales, but she saw right through it. "That is what you do to pay rent," she said, waving her hand dismissively. "But it is not who you are. I recognize the look of a frustrated inventor when I see one." Perhaps it was her perceptiveness or simply my desperate need to connect with someone who might understand, but I found myself accepting her invitation to sit. Over the next hour, my story poured out more comprehensively than I had ever shared it before. Dr. Warren listened intently, occasionally, asking sharp, insightful questions. When I finished, she was silent for a long moment, tapping her fingers thoughtfully on the table. "The legal situation is problematic," she finally said, "but not necessarily insurmountable. And more importantly, they took your first invention, not your mind." "What does that mean?" I asked. "It means, young woman, that you are still capable of creating. Perhaps something even better than your original design." She leaned forward. "Tell me, in the years since, have you thought about improvements to your original concept, things you would do differently now?" I hesitated. Of course I had, in the dark hours of sleepless nights, identified numerous refinements and enhancements. The commercial version of my device, while impressive, still had limitations that I believed could be addressed with further innovation. "I have some ideas," I admitted cautiously. "I thought so." She smiled for the first time. "Meet me here tomorrow, same time. Bring a notebook, and perhaps run a comb through your hair." That meeting marked the beginning of my resurrection. Dr. Warren became mentor, sounding board, and occasionally drill sergeant. Under her guidance, I began researching again, starting with a thorough review of the current GlucoGuard system's technical specifications and user feedback. "Know your competition intimately," Dr. Warren advised, "especially when your competition is using your own idea." We spent hours at the law library researching intellectual property precedents and examining the precise language of patent protections. Dr. Warren introduced me to a former student of hers who now specialized in patent law, who provided valuable insights without the prohibitive consultation fees. "The key is to create something that builds upon your original concept but is distinct enough to warrant new patent protection," the attorney explained. "You cannot patent the same invention twice, but you can patent significant improvements or alternative approaches to the same problem." A critical breakthrough came when I discovered through careful examination of publicly available documents that my parents had potentially committed fraud during the patent transfer. The final sale agreement included a signature that was purportedly mine authorizing additional transfer terms, but I had never signed such a document. This discovery did not immediately solve my problems, but it provided leverage I had previously lacked. With renewed purpose, I returned to the technical challenge. Working evenings and weekends in Dr. Warren's home workshop, I began developing an improved version of my glucose monitoring system. The new design addressed several limitations of the current GlucoGuard system: longer sensor life, improved accuracy during physical activity, and a more user-friendly interface. 3 months into this work, Dr. Warren made an unexpected offer. "I would like to provide you with a loan," she said one evening as we reviewed testing protocols. $30,000. Enough to secure patent protection for your new design and create a professional-grade prototype. I cannot accept that, I protested immediately. It is too much, and I have no guarantee of success. "Consider it an investment, not charity," she replied firmly. "I have not been this intellectually stimulated since I retired. Besides, I have more money than I need and no children to leave it to. I would rather see it used to right a wrong in my lifetime." With her financial support and continued guidance, I formalized my new design and submitted a comprehensive patent application. We decided to call the new company Audrey Med, a clear statement of ownership that no one could misappropriate. The initial team consisted of just 2 people, myself and Raj Patel, a brilliant young engineer who had worked briefly for Meditech, but left due to ethical concerns about their aggressive patent acquisition tactics. Raj brought valuable industry knowledge and complementary technical skills. More importantly, he brought belief in the project and in me. "The GlucoGuard has significant limitations that the company has no incentive to address," Raj explained during our first working session. "They have market dominance and massive profit margins. But your design solves problems users do not even realize they have yet." The technical improvements were substantial. While Meditech's device required calibration twice daily, our system needed it only twice weekly. The sensors in the GlucoGuard lasted 14 days. Ours extended to 30. Our power management system allowed for a battery life of 3 months compared to their 1 month. Perhaps most significantly, our algorithm could predict dangerous blood sugar trends 30 minutes earlier than their system, giving users crucial additional time to prevent serious episodes. 6 months after my coffee shop encounter with Dr. Warren, we were ready to seek initial funding. Through Dr. Warren's extensive professional network, we secured a meeting with 3 angel investors who specialized in medical technology. The pitch meeting was scheduled at a small conference room in a business center, a far cry from Meditech's gleaming corporate headquarters, but a significant step nonetheless. I spent weeks preparing for the presentation, refining our prototype, polishing the business plan, and rehearsing my pitch until I could deliver it in my sleep. The morning of the meeting, Dr. Warren met me for coffee beforehand. "Remember, you are not asking for a favor," she said firmly. "You are offering them an opportunity to be part of something important. Stand tall." The meeting began with typical introductions and small talk. The investors, 2 men and 1 woman, all had extensive backgrounds in healthcare investments and asked pointed, knowledgeable questions. When it came time for my presentation, I took a deep breath and channeled not just my technical knowledge, but also the determination that had carried me through the darkest period of my life. The continuous glucose monitoring market currently exceeds $2 billion annually and is growing at 20% year over year. I began displaying our first slide. The current market leader uses technology that, while revolutionary when introduced, now has significant limitations that our system directly addresses. For the next 30 minutes, I outlined our technical advantages, market strategy, and financial projections. I demonstrated the prototype, explaining each improvement with confidence born from intimate knowledge of both the technology and the user needs. When I finished, there was a moment of silence that seemed to stretch forever. "Your technical credentials are impressive," the female investor finally said. "But Meditech is a formidable competitor. What makes you think you can challenge them successfully?" I met her gaze directly. "Because I invented their core technology. I know its strengths and limitations better than anyone, and I have spent years thinking about how to make it better." The room grew very still. I had not planned to reveal this connection, but in that moment it felt necessary to establish my unique position. "That is a remarkable claim," one of the male investors said carefully. "Can you elaborate?" I provided a brief factual account of the original patent situation, being careful to avoid emotional language or details that might make me appear bitter rather than determined. I concluded by explaining how this history had provided me with unique insight into both the technology and the competitor. After a brief private discussion, the investors returned with an offer of $500,000 in seed funding in exchange for a 15% equity stake. The valuation was lower than I had hoped, but it was enough to move forward to establish proper laboratory space and to begin the process of formal clinical testing. As we shook hands to close the deal, the female investor pulled me aside. "Your personal story was compelling," she said quietly, "but what really sold us was your technical insight and your resilience. Not many people could have bounced back from that kind of setback." With funding secured, AudreyMed began to take shape as a real company rather than just an idea. We leased a small laboratory space, purchased essential equipment, and recruited 2 additional team members, a regulatory affairs specialist and another engineer with expertise in medical software development. The first round of product testing with volunteer patients yielded promising results. Our system consistently outperformed the GlucoGuard in accuracy, reliability, and user satisfaction. Patients particularly appreciated the extended sensor life, which meant less frequent painful insertions, and the more accurate readings during exercise, which allowed for greater freedom of activity. A small but growing buzz began to build around our company in industry circles. A healthcare technology blog published an article titled "GlucoGuard Challenger Emerges with Superior Technology," highlighting our innovative approach and technical advantages. Other industry publications followed with similar coverage, creating a narrative of the nimble startup poised to challenge the established giant. It was after one such article appeared that I received my first contact from my parents in nearly 3 years. An email arrived in my business account with the subject line, "Congratulations from your parents. Audrey, we have seen the recent coverage of your new company and wanted to express our pride in your accomplishments," the message began. "It seems you have found your path after all. Perhaps we should meet to discuss how we might support your endeavors. Family should stick together in business ventures. Love, Mom and Dad." No acknowledgement of their betrayal, no apology, just a transparent attempt to attach themselves to my potential success, just as they had with Meditech. I deleted the email without responding and blocked the address. As our clinical results continued to demonstrate clear superiority over the market leader, more substantial investor interest followed. Venture capital firms began reaching out, and larger medical device companies made discreet inquiries about potential partnerships. The team expanded to 12 people, each bringing valuable skills and shared commitment to our mission of creating a truly superior patient experience. What had begun as a desperate attempt to reclaim my professional identity was evolving into something far more significant, a genuine opportunity to improve the lives of millions of diabetes patients worldwide. For the first time since the original betrayal, I allowed myself to feel not just determination, but actual hope. The real turning point came 18 months after founding AudreyMed. Our clinical trials had progressed exceptionally well, with data showing consistently superior performance compared to the GlucoGuard system. Our extended 60-day trial, involving 200 patients across 3 medical centers, had yielded results even better than we had projected: 98% accuracy during normal activities, 92% during intense exercise, sensor life averaging 34 days, and critical alert times averaging 28 minutes earlier than the leading competitor. These results attracted serious attention from both the medical community and investors. After an intense period of due diligence and negotiations, we secured Series A funding of $12 million from Horizon Healthcare Partners, a major investment group specializing in medical technology. The funding valued AudreyMed at $80 million, a figure that seemed almost unreal to me after years of financial struggle. The day after the funding announcement appeared in industry publications, I arrived at our company headquarters, now a proper office and laboratory space in Cambridge, to find my parents waiting in the reception area. My father wore an expensive tailored suit with a silk tie, my mother a designer dress I had never seen before. Both looked prosperous and confident, as if they were major investors arriving for a scheduled meeting rather than uninvited visitors. "Audrey," my father called out as I entered, rising from his seat with arms extended as if for an embrace. "There is our brilliant daughter." I stopped cold, staring at them in disbelief. My receptionist looked confused and apologetic. "I am sorry, Miss Mitchell. They said they were your parents and insisted on waiting. Should I call security?" "That will not be necessary, Linda," I replied, keeping my voice steady despite the adrenaline surging through my system. "Please, show them to the conference room and ask Raj and Melissa to join us there in 5 minutes." I needed those 5 minutes to compose myself. In my office, I took deep breaths, straightened my jacket, and reminded myself that I was no longer the vulnerable, devastated young woman whose invention had been stolen. I was now CEO of a promising medical device company, backed by significant investment and surrounded by a team who respected my leadership. When I entered the conference room, my parents were admiring the framed press coverage on the walls. My father turned with a broad smile that did not reach his eyes. "Quite an impressive operation you have built here," he said warmly. "We always knew you had potential." "Why are you here?" I asked, directly remaining, standing despite the chairs around the conference table. "To reconnect, of course," my mother said, as if it were obvious, "and to discuss how we might support your new venture. Family is important in business." The door opened, and Raj entered along with Melissa Chen, our newly hired legal counsel. I had briefed them both about my history with my parents, so they understood the delicacy of the situation. "These are my colleagues, Raj Patel, Chief Technical Officer, and Melissa Chen, Legal Counsel," I said formally. "Raj, Melissa, these are Richard and Margaret Mitchell." My father extended his hand enthusiastically. "Wonderful to meet you both. We have been following your company's progress with great interest. Very impressive technical achievements." Raj nodded politely but did not engage further. Melissa took the lead, her expression professionally neutral. "Perhaps you could clarify the purpose of your visit today, Mr. and Mrs. Mitchell. Miss Mitchell's schedule is quite full." "As we were just telling Audrey, we are here to discuss potential family involvement in her company," my father replied smoothly. "Given our previous experience with medical technology investments, we thought we might be able to offer valuable insights. Perhaps acquire some shares in this early stage while the valuation is still reasonable." The audacity was breathtaking. I felt a momentary urge to laugh at the sheer absurdity of his proposal, but instead maintained my composure. "Previous experience," I repeated. "You mean when you sold my patent without my knowledge for a fraction of its value?" My father's smile tightened. "That is ancient history, Audrey. A misunderstanding that turned out for the best, as evidenced by your current success. We should focus on the future, not the past." Melissa opened a folder she had brought with her. "Speaking of that misunderstanding, we have been reviewing the documentation from that transaction. We have some concerns about certain signatures that appear on the final transfer documents." My father's expression flickered briefly before he regained his confident demeanor. All the paperwork was handled properly through attorneys. Everything was completely legal. "That is interesting," Melissa continued calmly, "because we have evidence suggesting that Audrey's signature was forged on several key documents. That would constitute fraud and could potentially invalidate the entire transaction." The color drained from my father's face. My mother clutched her designer handbag more tightly, her knuckles whitening. "That is a serious accusation," my father said, his voice lower now, "and completely unfounded." "We have submitted the documents for forensic analysis," Melissa continued. "Preliminary results strongly indicate forgery. We have also scheduled meetings with Meditech's legal team to discuss the implications." This was our strongest leverage. While reclaiming the original patent might be challenging given the time elapsed and Meditech's resources, the threat of fraud allegations and potential public scandal provided significant negotiating power. "I think you misunderstand our intentions in coming here today," my mother interjected, her voice strained. "We only want to support Audrey's new endeavors. The past is the past." "Is it?" I finally spoke again. "Because from where I stand, you only appeared once my new company started getting positive press. Where were you during the years I struggled, after you sold my patent? Where were you when I could barely afford rent? When I was working night shifts, stocking groceries? We tried to contact you, my father protested. You cut us off. After you took everything I had worked for, I replied evenly. After you sold my future for $10,000 and kept every penny for yourselves. We are your parents, my father said, an edge of anger now evident in his voice. We acted in what we believed was your best interest. You were too inexperienced to navigate the business world. We protected you from inevitable failure. You did not protect me. You betrayed me. I placed both hands on the conference table and leaned forward slightly. And now that I have succeeded despite your actions, you want to benefit from that success. The answer is no. There will be no family shares, no involvement, no relationship between Audrey Med and either of you. My father's facade of pleasant reconciliation finally cracked completely. You have always been ungrateful. Do you have any idea how it looks socially when people ask about you, and we have to explain that our daughter refuses to speak to us? After all, we did for you. I suggest you focus your concerns on how it will look socially when people learn that you forged your daughter's signature to sell her patent, Melissa interjected coolly. That could have implications beyond mere embarrassment. The meeting with my parents ended shortly thereafter with no resolution but a clear statement of boundaries. They left with threats of their own about family loyalty and legal consequences, but their position had been significantly weakened by our fraud evidence. 2 weeks later, we had our first meeting with Meditech's legal team. The company initially took a hard line dismissing our claims and emphasizing the statute of limitations on certain types of fraud allegations. However, when we presented the forensic evidence of signature forgery and outlined our willingness to pursue both legal action and public disclosure, their position softened considerably. After 3 months of intensive negotiations, we reached a settlement that, while not returning the original patent to me, provided significant compensations and acknowledgments. First, Meditech agreed to a public statement recognizing me as the original inventor of the core technology behind the GlucoGuard system, correcting the historical record. Second, they agreed to a substantial financial settlement, the exact amount protected by confidentiality agreements, but sufficient to ensure Audrey Med's financial stability, regardless of future investment rounds. Third, and perhaps most valuable, from a business perspective, they agreed to a non-opposition arrangement regarding our new patents, effectively clearing the path for our improved device to enter the market without expensive legal challenges. The day the settlement was finalized, I received a text message from my father. I hope you are satisfied with what you have done to this family. I did not respond. There was nothing left to say. The legal battle had exposed their actions not just to me but to their social circle. Several of their friends had reached out to me privately expressing shock at what they had learned and offering belated support. My father's carefully constructed image as a savvy businessman with impeccable ethics had been irreparably damaged. In a final confrontation that occurred unexpectedly at an industry conference 6 months later, my father approached me during a reception. He looked older, diminished somehow, the confident swagger replaced by a defensive posture. Was all this really necessary, he asked, without preamble? Destroying our reputation, making us pariahs in our own community? I looked at him steadily, feeling, not triumph, but a strange sense of calm detachment. I did not destroy anything. Your actions did that. I simply ensured that the truth came to light. We were trying to protect you, he insisted, though, with less conviction than before. No, I replied simply. You were trying to control me, to own my achievements, to diminish me so that you could feel important. That stops now. As I walked away from that conversation, I realized that I had finally reclaimed not just my professional identity, but my personal power as well. The journey had been longer and more painful than I could have ever imagined, but it had led me to a place of strength I might never have found otherwise. 5 years after the confrontation with my parents and the settlement with Meditech, Audrey Med had grown into a respected player in the medical device industry. Our headquarters now occupied an entire floor of a Cambridge office building with a staff of 70 talented engineers, researchers, regulatory specialists, and support personnel. Our flagship glucose monitoring system, marketed under the name TrueSense, had captured 23% of the market, challenging Meditech's dominance with demonstrably superior technology. More importantly, we had expanded our product line to include monitoring systems for other chronic conditions, maintaining our core philosophy of exceptional accuracy, user comfort, and accessibility. We had intentionally kept our prices lower than competitors, working directly with insurance companies and patient advocacy groups to ensure that those who needed our devices could obtain them regardless of financial circumstances. The professional success was gratifying, but the personal journey of healing proved more complex and nuanced. After the settlement, I established very limited, strictly conditional contact with my parents. We did not share holidays or casual family gatherings, but maintained minimal civil communication primarily through email. My mother occasionally sent birthday cards or brief updates about extended family members. My father rarely initiated contact, though he would respond to direct questions if I asked them, which was seldom. This arm-length relationship was not born from lingering anger, but from a clear-eyed assessment of what was healthy for me. Therapy had helped me understand that forgiveness did not necessarily mean restoration of trust or close relationship. I could release the consuming anger while still maintaining boundaries necessary for my well-being. Forgiveness is not about the other person, my therapist had explained during one particularly insightful session. It is about freeing yourself from the burden of resentment. You can forgive someone and still choose not to have them actively in your life. This perspective allowed me to move forward without the weight of bitterness that had once threatened to consume me. I no longer woke in the night replaying their betrayal or imagining confrontations. The past remained acknowledged, but no longer defined my present or future. One of the most healing aspects of my journey was the creation of the Young Inventors Protection Foundation, a nonprofit organization funded by a percentage of AudreyMed's profits. The foundation provided legal support, business guidance, and mentorship to young innovators, with a particular focus on helping them navigate the complex world of intellectual property protection. We published clear, accessible guides on patent rights, offered free consultations with patent attorneys, and provided grants for promising innovations that might otherwise never reach development. Through this work, I met countless brilliant young minds with transformative ideas and watched them grow into confident innovators who maintained ownership of their creations. Each success story helped heal another small piece of my past wound. Sarah Chen, a 19-year-old engineering student who had developed a revolutionary water filtration system, later told me, "Your foundation saved my invention." Before your attorneys reviewed my contracts, I was about to sign away 90% of my rights for almost nothing. Now I have a fair partnership and can actually see my work help communities that need clean water. These experiences reinforced what had become my core belief that the value of innovation lies not just in financial success, but in the positive impact on human lives and in the integrity of the creative process itself. My personal life, once sacrificed entirely to survival and then to professional redemption, gradually regained balance. I developed deep friendships with people who knew my whole story and valued me not for my success, but for who I was beneath the achievements. Dr. Eleanor Warren remained a cherished mentor and friend until her passing at age 86, leaving behind a legacy of women engineers she had guided throughout her long career. My relationship with Raj evolved from professional respect to deep friendship and eventually to something more. Our shared passion for innovation and similar values created a foundation of understanding that made romance feel like a natural progression rather than a disruption. We maintained clear boundaries between our personal relationship and professional roles, each respecting the other's expertise and independence. The most profound healing, however, came from reconnecting with my own creativity and purpose. Beyond the business success or personal relationships, I had rediscovered the pure joy of solving problems and creating solutions that helped others. Late nights in the lab, testing new sensor configurations, collaborative brainstorming sessions with our research team, conversations with patients whose lives had been improved by our devices. All these moments reminded me why I had fallen in love with biomedical engineering in the first place. I began speaking at engineering schools and conferences, sharing not just technical knowledge, but also hard-earned wisdom about protecting intellectual property and maintaining ethical standards in innovation. My story, once a source of shame and pain, became a powerful teaching tool that resonated with audiences ranging from industry veterans to first-year engineering students. The most valuable patent protection is not just legal documentation, I would tell them. It is surrounding yourself with people of integrity who value your contribution and respect your rights as a creator. At a medical device innovation conference in San Francisco, a young engineer approached me after my presentation, clutching a notebook filled with sketches. "I have been working on a monitoring system for epilepsy patients," she explained nervously. "But my professor says the regulatory hurdles are too high, and I should sell the concept to an established company. After hearing your story, I am not sure what to do." We spent an hour discussing her invention, the potential pathways to development, and the resources available through our foundation. As she left with a clear action plan and renewed confidence, I realized how far I had come from the devastated young woman who had once destroyed her research notes in despair. The journey from betrayal to rebuilding had taught me lessons that transcended the specific circumstances of my experience. First, that resilience is not about avoiding pain, but about finding purpose that is larger than the pain. Second, that true success is measured not by financial metrics, but by positive impact and personal integrity. Third, that healing does not erase the past, but transforms its meaning in the present. And finally, that our greatest innovations often emerge from our deepest challenges if we have the courage to keep creating despite them. As I look toward the future, I feel neither defined by the betrayal I experienced nor limited by the success that followed. Instead, I see myself as continuously evolving, bringing the wisdom of past experiences to new challenges and opportunities. The patent my parents sold may have been valued at $1 billion, but the lessons I gained from losing and then rebuilding have proven truly priceless. Have you ever had someone underestimate your potential or take credit for your work? How did you respond to that situation? I would love to hear your stories in the comments below. If this story resonated with you, please subscribe to hear more journeys of resilience and growth. Like and share this video if you believe in standing up for your worth, even when those closest to you fail to see it. Thank you for listening to my story, and remember, your greatest comeback might be waiting just on the other side of your biggest setback.